Now we'll continue on, moving on from the nose into that pharynx.
So the nasopharynx is part of the pharynx, which is divided into three sections. Also has the oropharynx and the laryngopharynx. Now the oropharynx and the laryngopharynx are not lined with a normal respiratory epithelium. They're lined with a stratified squamous epithelium. Now, knowing what we know about stratified squamous epithelium, you should be able to figure out why that is. I want you to take a moment and try and write down why you think these are lined with stratified squamous epithelium instead of an ordinary respiratory epithelium. The larynx. The larynx is made of cartilaginous pieces held together with connective tissue and muscle and smooth muscle. The larynx allows passage of air to the trachea. It has the epiglottis at the top, and then false vocal cords and true vocal folds with the glottis in the middle. Now, the epiglottis is what prevents you from breathing in your food. When you choke on your food, that's a failure of the epiglottis. And when the epiglottis is up, the trachea is open and you can breathe normally. When the epiglottis goes down, that opens the passageway for food, and it closes the trachea so that whatever food you're swallowing or liquid you're swallowing doesn't go down the trachea. The tongue also partially blocks this passageway and pushes that food down. Now this, like most things, has a failure mode that's particularly common in some young children, where the epiglottis can fold over on its own. It's soft, it's not fully hardened, and this softer cartilage can just fall over, collapsing the larynx in laryngomalacia. Now, moving down from the epiglottis, we reach the vocal cords and the glottis. Now these, the vocal cords, of course, close or partially or completely, and when you expel air through partially or completely closed vocal cords, it produces vibration, which produces the sound that I'm using right now. And the size of these vocal cords and the shape of these vocal cords determines the type of sound that we can make. And we can hold these in a variety of different degrees of closedness to make different sounds in different positions. The larynx also has ligaments and muscles. There are extrinsic muscles around it that elevate the larynx, which is what bends the epiglottis down. And there are intrinsic muscles that close the glottis, that close those vocal folds. We reach the trachea. The trachea, also known as the windpipe, is made of mucosa and banded with cartilage. So here we have that tracheal epithelium, should look fairly familiar. There's a thick lamina propria, which is a connective tissue basal layer, and then the pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium with goblet cells, so with the cilia moving the air around and also producing that mucus to line the trachea. Now, the trachealis muscle, there's a cartilage around the front, just C-shaped, and there's a trachealis muscle around the back that's connecting that cartilage. And these bands of cartilage go all the way down the trachea and then continue down the primary bronchi, where the trachea splits off into two, and continue to a lesser degree down the secondary and tertiary bronchi, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Now, bronchi should sound familiar to you, at the very least from bronchitis. Bronchitis is the inflammation of the bronchi, where the walls become inflamed and thickened, and mucus builds up in those bronchi, making it difficult for air to pass through them. Now, this is not pneumonia, where fluid is actually building up in the alveoli, which we're going to get to in a moment, but in the actual air sacs of the lungs. But this is fluid buildup in the bronchi, which can lead to fluid buildup in the air sacs. And however, at this point, we can still cough it out. It's much harder to cough it out when it's in the alveoli.
And this ends our section on the passageway to the lungs. We'll continue with the third lecture shortly with the lungs themselves.